So in Xhosa, we talk about Ubuntu, Ubunzulu, which in English means the depth of humanity. It talks about the circle of man and how we are all connected in a circle. And Nelson Mandela and Archbishop Desmond Tutu popularized the term of Ubuntu, of the term humanity, which is a term that comes from Central Africa and then it moved down with the Nguni tribes to South Africa. And Ubuntu says, I am what I am because of who we all are. So if one person suffers, we all suffer. If one person is not connected to their ancestors, we are all struggling with that. And it also says that the responsibility of mankind rests on every single human being. So as we connect to that part of us which connects to the divine, then we as a human race have an opportunity to move closer to the ancestral realm, to the spirit realm. The path of becoming a human being, of connecting to your humanity, is first to connect to your soul and your spirit, and then we turn and connect with our mother's people and our father's people and our spirit guides. And in so doing, we connect with our humanity, and then we connect to our seventh sense, which is the sense of manifestation, where we have a dream and we are shown something, and then we can manifest that into the world and we can change this world.
Today, our guest is John Lockley. John is a fully initiated African shaman and healer. He was one of the first white men in recent history to become a fully initiated Sangoma in the Xhosa lineage of South Africa. This is the same lineage from which came Nelson Mandela and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. John trained as a Zen Buddhist under renowned Zen master Subong in a monastery in South Korea. He now works with people through different healing modalities and also offers a mentoring program where he helps people to heal the pain and blame of their ancestral lineage to reclaim their authenticity. So welcome, John. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to talk with you.
Thanks, Sarah. Lovely to see you today. Thank you.
Absolutely. Same here. I know we had a little challenge getting this on the calendar, but I'm so glad we made it happen because you have such a unique background, and I really wanted to share your story with the audience. As a traditional Sangoma shaman, I know that's not something that we hear about every day. So I would love for us to start off first with, how does one even become a Sangoma shaman? I mean, that just seems so unique. Is it a calling or is it a lineage that you're following? How is somebody initiated into the tribe?
So Sangoma means people of the song, and these are the medicine people or the African shamans of Southern Africa. So as people know, there's 54 different countries in Africa, and I'm from South Africa, which is right at the bottom of Africa. And Southern African countries include about 7 different countries, and that'll be Botswana, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Mozambique. And from that point down, those Southern African countries, medicine people are seen as Sangomas, African shamans. And to become a Sangoma, to become an African shaman, you are called through dreams. You don't decide that you want to become a Sangoma, you're called in your dreams. And this is what happened to me. And then also you receive what's called a calling illness, or a thwasa. We call it the thwasa. And the calling illness is endemic in all traditional shamanic groups around the world. And that's basically where your immune system is weakened because your psychic ability is heightened. So you get all these dreams, you have all these psychic experiences, but that weakens your immune system, and then you are open to all kinds of illnesses. So this is what happened to me. I had a lot of different illnesses and a lot of prophetic dreams, and then I was invited into the tradition by my teacher, who's a Xhosa Sangoma and a senior Sangoma in the Xhosa tribe, and she invited me to become her apprentice. So that's how it happened for me, in a very short description.
Yeah, wow. It sounds like it's a bit of a traumatic journey to be initiated into these tribes. So when you were having these illnesses come upon you, was that the starting point of your journey to becoming a shaman? Is that kind of where you had this moment of awareness that this is what this process looks like for me, and now I feel this calling? I mean, I'm just wondering how many people go through these illnesses and have this awareness come over them that this is a calling for them.
Yes, that's a good question. Well, basically, I had a feeling, because I'm brought up in South Africa and educated and in South Africa, and I had a feeling that there was something in terms of becoming a Sangoma. In the time I was brought up in Apartheid, so we didn't have a word for Sangoma, but we had a witch doctor. So I had this feeling of being called to become a witch doctor, but it was a feeling rather than, we can all have feelings, but those feelings have to be confirmed in the outer world. So I had these feelings and I had these dreams, and even growing up from a young age and going at the age of 6 or 7, I had a feeling around that. I remember one day, my dad went on a business trip, and I think I must have been maybe 5 years old, and he came back and he put this blanket over me, a Swazi blanket with similar colors to this behind me, and he gave me this stick, which was a ceremonial stick. And it was quite interesting because years later, I was offered those 2 items, maybe 30 years later, when I was baptized in the Swazi tradition to become a Sangoma. So it was quite interesting how there were these interwoven kind of events that happened from a very young age, which showed that I was being called into this tradition. So I'm a Sangoma in 2 different tribes, in the Xhosa tribe and also in the Swazi tribe. And I had to do an apprenticeship in both of them. My Xhosa tradition or Xhosa apprenticeship was much longer. It was 10 years. And then the Swazi apprenticeship was much shorter because of the long period that I'd done in terms of the Xhosa apprenticeship. So when I was born with this white clay around my eyes. And my mother comes from Dublin, Ireland. And when I came out of the womb in Cape Town beneath Table Mountain, she thought I looked like a little Abbo, a little Aborigine, because she had just been living in Australia. And the white doctor at the time was shocked when she said that. And the Xhosa nurses were ululating because I had this beautiful, white clay around my eyes. And my mother forgot all of that until she met my teacher, Mam Gwevu, years later, when I went to go and visit my parents and introduce my teacher to them. And as my mother came out of, as my teacher, Mam Gwevu, came out of the car, she had this white clay around her eyes, which we use ceremonially as Xhosa Sangomas. And in that moment, my mother remembered my birth. And she told my teacher, she said, when John was born, he had this white clay around his eyes. And my teacher said to him, so was I. I was born in the same way. And John was born to become a Sangoma. And here we are today.
Wow, that's incredible. I know you mentioned apprenticeship, and there's a few different things I want to ask you about what you just shared, but the apprenticeship piece, from what I understand, is a very challenging time for somebody to go through when they are becoming a shaman. Can you share with us a little bit about what the experience is like when you are going through these apprenticeships?
Yes, the apprenticeship is very painful because it's all about killing the ego. Okay, so to kill the ego means we have to become a blank slate. We must become a hollow bone so that the spirits can move through us uninterrupted because of our own ideas and opinions, which is where the ego comes in. So there's many different ways that we reduce the ego in traditional practices. So fasting, and also in our tradition, it's trance dancing. So we dance and dance and dance, and you get exhausted with the dancing until all there is the spirit and the movement of the breath through you and the sound of the drum. So it's done in a very gentle way, but in a very dynamic way. And yes, it is painful because we all hold on to our thoughts and ideas and our opinions. We all hold on to that so strongly, and we all have blind spots. So when you're going through a traditional apprenticeship, it's almost like you do a life review in your mind, and in your dreams, you are shown your own past and your history, and you are called to heal it, to heal your story, and also to let go your story, to let go whatever issues you have. You are called to do that. And then the visions get stronger. And, you can never completely kill your ego, to be honest with you, because we're all human beings and we need our ego. But what we have to reduce is the selfish ego, where you're just focusing on I, my, me, I, my, me. And in the traditional apprenticeship, it's about us. So in Xhosa, we talk about Ubuntu, Ubunzulu, which in English means the depth of humanity. It talks about the circle of man and how we are all connected in a circle. And Nelson Mandela and Archbishop Desmond Tutu popularized the term of Ubuntu, of the term humanity, which is a term that comes from Central Africa and then it moved down with the Nguni tribes to South Africa. And Ubuntu says, I am what I am because of who we all are. So if one person suffers, we all suffer. If one person is not connected to their ancestors, we are all struggling with that. And it also says that the responsibility of mankind rests on every single human being. So as we connect to that part of us which connects to the divine, then we, as a human race, have an opportunity to move closer to the ancestral realm, to the spirit realm. So Ubuntu means that we have to connect to all our 7 senses as a human being. And it also says that we have to make a decision to become a human being. So we are all born looking like humans, but when we go through initiation, we have to make a decision to become a human being. So to become a human being means you need to make a decision to connect with your humanity, to connect with your spirit, your soul, that part of you that goes beyond physical death, and then connect with your ancestors and the roots and those people that created you. So the path of becoming a human being, of connecting to your humanity, is first to connect to your soul and your spirit, and then we turn and connect with our mother's people and our father's people and our spirit guides. And in so doing, we connect with our humanity, and then we connect to our 7th sense, which is the sense of manifestation, where we have a dream and we are shown something, and then we can manifest that into the world, and we can change this world. So this is the focus of initiation. Initiation is about reducing the ego and replacing the ego with a hollow bone, where you can feel the messages from the ancient ones, and then you can translate it and give it to the people as a messenger. So Sangomas are highly refined empaths. And an empath is someone who's very sensitive, who feels the suffering of the world. So in South Africa, many people don't want to become Sangomas. So it's very different from Europe and America, where people want to become shamans. In Africa, in South Africa, people don't want to become shamans because of the pain involved in becoming a shaman. They know the pain, and the pain is about becoming an empath. It means that you become very sensitive in terms of your dream life, and you also become very sensitive to other people's pain and suffering. So the journey in becoming a Sangoma is a beautiful journey, but it's also a painful journey, and it's a bit like turning coal into a diamond. It requires pressure, it requires intense practice, it requires heat and dedication.
That's exactly the word that came to mind, dedication, because you would have to really dig deep inside to not overcome the ego, but to really kind of set it aside and go deep into all of the concepts that you just laid out. I think all of that would be so helpful for people, but obviously it's a lot of work. So I can understand why not too many people choose that calling. So I did want to jump back though to the introduction. I mentioned that you are one of the only white men in recent times that have been brought into or initiated into the tribe. I wondered if you could share with us a little bit more about what it is like to be a white person in a tribe that is primarily African and what that feels like for you. Are you widely accepted into the tribe? Is that something that is extremely uncommon? What more could you share with us about that?
Well, I could say there's quite a few white people who've got involved in becoming Sangomas now, and they've been accepted. Now, we just have to be aware that in South Africa, the population of South Africa is about, I don't know, 50 or 60 million people, and only 8% of the population are white people. So it's much smaller than the United States. So you just need to be aware of that. So the people accepted me. They've been very beautiful towards me. In the beginning, it was really tough because apartheid had just ended, and there wasn't a lot of love for someone with white skin in my particular area because of what had happened to the people, quite rightly. So I understood that. But the people were very, very, very kind towards me. So my teacher and her husband welcomed me into their home as their son. So that was a very beautiful experience, and still is, because we're still very close. And those people who just saw me as a white person, and they weren't happy with the color of my skin because of what's happened historically in South Africa, I was very aware that they didn't dislike John. They didn't know John. They just disliked what my white skin represented. So I completely understood that. Because of the history of apartheid. It was very brutal, it was very painful, and it just took a number of years for people in the community to get to know me, and now there's a lot of love and a lot of respect and a lot of care, but it's been 25 years. 25 years I've been in this particular community in South Africa. I was at university there as well. I lived there for a number of years. So I'm very much part of the community. And I think, like any situation with people, you might have your prejudice based on historical stories of pain and insurrection. But once you start to get to know someone on their own as an individual, then we are open to changing those opinions. So that's been part of the story and the journey that I've been on. But like I said, there are a number of white people now with white skin, white South Africans, and also folks from overseas who've come into South Africa to be initiated as Sangomas. So it has changed dramatically in the last 20 years.
And that actually opens up the door to my next question, which, we hear oftentimes people in the world say, I'm a shaman. And I hear that from friends. I've got close contacts that say, oh, I offer shamanism, I offer shaman workshops. It sounds like there are a number of different types of shamanism. And I was wondering, could you walk us through what the different types are that are out there? Because I know what the shaman that you represent is very different from some of these other more modern day shamans that, let's say, who maybe don't go through the apprenticeship that you've been through. Could you share a little bit more with us about that?
Yes, sure. I'm a traditionally trained Sangoma. So traditional shamans are probably the oldest. I mean, that's how shamanism has been passed on, is through lineage. And so with traditional shamanism, it's often done in traditional tribes. and traditional cultures, and often it's done in another language. So it's not done in English. It would be done in Xhosa or Zulu or whatever the local indigenous language is. And often with traditional shamanism, you have to be called, and the calling comes through dreams, and then you have to have that confirmed by the elders. So with traditional shamanism, you don't choose to become a Sangoma or a shaman. You are invited. You're invited in by the elders. So this is very, very important. So first, your calling is assessed by the elders, and then they choose to invite you to become an apprentice. So that's with traditional shamanism, and often it takes a number of years. So to become a shaman, like in the Siberian tradition or Mongolian tradition or in South Africa, it can take anything from 5 to 20 years. It takes many, many years. I met this Greenland shaman, and he didn't even call himself a shaman, and he said, because I haven't done the final initiation yet. And then when he did the final initiation, he said that, he'd been on the path for 30 years at this time, but there was one initiation which he hadn't done. He hadn't climbed this particular holy mountain. And at this stage, he had been moving around the world running workshops and ceremonies, and everyone called him a shaman. But he was very honest. He said, amongst my people, I can only be called a full shaman once I've done this final ceremony, which I haven't done yet. And then he did the ceremony, and then he was a full shaman. And one of the reasons for this is that it's back to the ego, but again, in traditional cultures, people know based on their psychic ability or dreams that they've had. So these are the different ranges of shamanism. A lot of people can do a shamanic practitioner's course nowadays. There's many different shamanic practitioner's courses. After those courses, some people call themselves shamans, and some people would just call themselves shamanic practitioners. So as you can see, there's a broad range of who's called a shaman in terms of the modern world today. Personally, I think it's very important for people to still be aware of the root of shamanism, the root of traditional culture and how it's maintained. And I always feel that if people are very interested in shamanism, and maybe they've done a shamanic practitioner's course, or they've done a training, a shamanism training, it's very helpful for them also to work with traditional shamans, whether it's in South America or Mongolia or Siberia, and because we are all one human race, and this ancient path of shamanism is growing and changing, but we need to be aware of the root of it. The root is very important, the root of how someone becomes a shaman in a traditional culture. In South Africa, we have many different songs and chants which are passed on, and they go hundreds of years, these songs and these chants. And one of my favorite Sangoma chant is called Masiembo. Masiembo, Masiembo, Embo, Masiembo, Masiembo, Embo, Masiembo, Masiembo, Embo, Masiembo, Masiembo, oh Masiembo, Embo, Masiembo. Now Masiembo means let us remember the old ways, let us remember our roots, let us remember our humanity. And that's a rallying cry for Sangomas, and we sing it to the community, and then this community sings back to us like a chorus, and the chorus is, we will remember, and it's very beautiful. So as shamanism is changing in the modern world, that's wonderful because it's all part of evolution. But like I say, I still think it's very important for people to also remember the traditional root and traditional shamanic cultures around the world today.
Absolutely. And that was beautiful, by the way. I could listen to that all day long. There's just something where it just speaks to the soul. It's just such a calming sound to hear. So thank you for sharing that with us. And you did mention something about initiation. And I was curious, would you mind sharing with us what was your initiation? What did that look like for you? Was that an event? Was it a journey? What exactly does the initiation look like when you're entering into these tribes?
So I can't go into full details because of the sacredness of it. So just so the listeners are aware, but I can share some of the basic structures of initiation, and that involves working with dancing. So lots of Sangoma dancing and drumming, and then you go into trance, and then the elders gift you with beads and they bless you. So initiation involves the initiate dancing for the community and going into trance, and then the elders blessing you. And it's a very beautiful process, and it's also painful because you have to face your own ego death, and you have to face your own likes and dislikes. And in my situation in South Africa, when we were going through it, sometimes that can be very hot, outside. So we get wrapped in blankets, and sometimes it's quite hot. And so you go through a lot of physical discomfort. But the physical discomfort is part of the initiation, the sense that you have to go beyond your physical discomfort and your egoic discomfort and embrace the spirit world, embrace the visions and the dreams that are coming to you. And when you do that, there's a sense of euphoria and a sense of peace, great peace. And then the elders recognize that, and then they bless you, and it's a very beautiful process. And to become a fully initiated Sangoma, there's a number of different initiations. You don't just get initiated once. You could be initiated from 5 to 7 times. These major initiations, we go through.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And you did mention drumming just a moment ago. And I know you have been very generous to offer to do some drumming for us, but I want to let the audience know John is going to drum for us at the end of the interview. So you want to stay tuned for that, because that's going to be a very special offering. So before we get there, I had a few more things I wanted to ask you about. And one of them was the tools that you use. So I know that you use herbs, you use prayers, and you also have ceremonies and rituals, which I think you were just mentioning a few of there. Can you share, how do these tools that you use help your clients when you're working with them?
Well, the biggest thing that a Sangoma does is help people to connect to their soul. So your soul has no gender. Your soul has no color. Your soul has no culture. And nowadays, with social media highlighting and watering the ego, sometimes people have this misperception about what the soul is. So the soul is opposite the ego. The soul is something that doesn't die. And everyone's responsibility, whether you're a Christian, whether you're Jewish or Hindu, everyone's responsibility is to grow and nourish that part of them that does not die, their soul. And every spiritual tradition has a particular way of going about that. But they're all very, very similar, actually, in many ways. Because the soul, what the soul loves is gratitude. What the soul loves is humility. What the soul loves is grace. What the soul loves is light. So it's like a plant. You have a plant in your room and you want it to grow. If you give it too much water, you can kill it. But if you give it enough water and then you're sensitive to it and you're gentle with it, then you watch the plant and you watch the shoots starting to form. And then you might put some fertilizer, maybe you'll water it a bit more. It's like that with the practice. Each human being has the soul inside of them like a plant. And I'm a soul doctor, and my job is to help people grow their soul, but I can't do it for them. I can't. They are responsible for growing their soul. So I can teach rituals, I can bring Dharma talks and teachings, I can talk about magic, I can talk about dreams, I can talk about ancestors, but people have to bring their knees onto the ground, we say as Sangomas. So we have to humble ourselves. And as you humble yourself, that's the quickest way to reduce your ego or your negative ego, the selfish ego. As you bring your knees and your forehead onto the ground and you let yourself melt into Mother Nature, then the spirit, the soul comes up. And so this is very important nowadays, especially with all the war and disharmony we are experiencing as a human race. It's very important that people reconnect to their essence. So the drum is very, very helpful because as we drum, we connect to our earth. We connect to the medicine of earth and our connection to rhythm and our connection to our own inner vitality. So when I'm working with clients, I work with that energy of the drum. And the energy of the drum for each human being is their own heartbeat. So their heartbeat is what I call as the inner drummer. So once people are aligned and in rhythm with their own heartbeat, there's a sense of peace that starts to come inside of them. And then their dreams become clearer and the confusion they have inside of them starts to dissipate. And I remember a wonderful experience I had when I was in New York City years ago, leading a workshop. And I was just giving a public talk and I had this drum with me. And I drummed and I sang and I got everyone dancing. And there was an incredible moment afterwards where every single person in that room came for a private session. And I was quite shocked by that. And then afterwards, people came to me with their dreams. And they had dreams that were like African dreams where they connected with their ancestors. And I was blown away by that. And I thought, I wonder how that happened. And then I had this epiphany. That's how it happened. Because we, as human beings, are like electrical sockets. We work with electricity. We are like walking conductors of electricity. So when a human being is out of balance, it's a bit like an electrical socket that's out of balance. So as we know, to have a healthy electrical system, you need 3 points in harmony. You need the neutral, you need the live wire, and you need the earth wire. Those 3 points make up a healthy electrical socket. So now if you think about a human being nowadays on computers, on social media, the one element of those 3 points that goes out of balance very quickly is the earth socket. Does that make sense? So the live wire is activated, the electrical wire is activated, and they're on the computer, and then they're wondering why they're not dreaming enough, and they're out of balance, they're not connected to their soul, and they wrapped up with their ego in the world of blame and shame. He said that, she said that, he said that, she said that, and it's like a ping pong match that never ends. So when they come into an environment where they are drumming, they're singing, and they're pushing their feet into the ground, they are earthed. And in that moment, there's peace. So this is what happened with this group of people, I noticed, because the drum and the singing and us dancing together, they're all earthed, and then they receive these profound dreams. And it's just literally a 3-hour workshop, 3-hour talk. So that was a wonderful example of how traditional shamanism or African shamanism, and I won't just say African actually, I would just say traditional shamanism, where we are working in an earth-centric way, how it can help people reboot their system and reconnect to the spirit inside of them.
It also speaks to the fact that you don't have to do traditional talking therapy to open yourself up to healing, right? Even sometimes just hearing this drumming could be enough to heal some trauma that you have in the body. And also in the ancestral lineage, which is something that I understand you also help your clients with. And I remember the first time that I heard about that, it made so much sense to me that we actually carry in our DNA some of the traumas that our prior ancestors have carried through the years. And we are completely unaware at times that we have this trauma in us, and it can result in triggers that we have where we don't even know where this came from. So I would love if you would share with us a little bit more about that, and how do you work with your clients once they realize, or that you realize for them, that they have this ancestral trauma that they're carrying around with them?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually, and you see a lot of that. So if you think about ancestral trauma, what is that? If you just unpack that, again, it's story. It's a story of shame, blame, stories of being an oppressor or being a victim. These are stories, and they're painful stories, and they're real stories, but they are stories. And these stories can get passed on from one generation to the next until people see it as the truth. And this is where you have to be careful, because a story is not necessarily the truth. It's an experience of the truth from someone. And a story can be cleansed and healed once the grief and the tears can flow. And it's very important that people do the work to heal the stories of their people. And the reason why it's important is because otherwise that shame or that blame or that energy of the story can linger, and it can turn into oppressing other groups of people. So there's a wonderful, and maybe not so wonderful, I could say, but there's a tendency, I could say, there's a human tendency, and that's played out through history, that oppressors or victims become oppressors. So someone who has or a group of people who have had a terrible experience with war and injustice, if they don't work through that story, they themselves or their children or their children's children can become oppressors, and they can murder and pillage and do exactly what happened to them. And this is the story of humanity. This is not rooted in one culture or one group of people. This is the story of the human race. So how can we heal that? Well, we have to do the work. And doing the work means feeling your ancestors, honoring them. But when you're honoring and working with your ancestors, you are not honoring their story. You are honoring the shining, the kanya, the sap of life that they have offered you. That's what you're honoring. That's what you're loving. And then you have an opportunity to work with the story that you have inherited. Is it true? Is it true that your people are this or your people are that? And if you come from a lineage of people that have been colonizers and have hurt other people, what can you do to heal that? So sometimes the story of our ancestors comes through us, and it's giving us an opportunity to do, like in my situation, reconciliation work, to stand in front of people who have been hurt by your people and say, I'm sorry on behalf of my ancestors. So in my situation, I mean, my mom and dad are beautiful people, and there was no one in my family as such that were racist or part of colonialism. But having white skin in South Africa, you feel the story and you feel a sense of shame. So what I did in South Africa with my elders is that I did a couple of reconciliation ceremonies where I apologized on behalf of white people that who had behaved badly and treated them with a lack of dignity. And I said, I'm so sorry on behalf of them. These people did not know what they were doing, and they were ignorant. They didn't realize how beautiful you are, and they didn't realize that they were making a huge mistake. And so that was one small way where I stood in that place in apartheid in terms of my community, and and I spoke from that place. So that's how we heal that ancestral lineage. And like I say, it involves work. It involves spiritual work. It involves looking with a real honesty about what's coming through you and looking at your family line. And I remember reading the Guardian newspapers, an English newspaper, I think it was last year, and there was an incredible story of this lady, this journalist, who came from this upper class family, and she was led to believe growing up that her ancestors were part of who were philanthropists. Their whole job was giving back to humanity. And that's the story she believed. That's the story she was fed growing up. And she decided to write write a novel about her family. So she started to research her family. And you know what she found? She found that the opposite was true. She found that they were related to slave traders. And that's how they made a lot of money, as slave traders. She was so shocked by that story because it completely upended the whole story that she was led to believe about her family. She called a family meeting. She told them what she had found. She showed them all the research that she had come across. Her whole family were so shocked. But you know what they did? And I was so proud, and I was so amazed and inspired. They made a family statement where they shared what they found, and on behalf of the family, they apologized. And they went to the Caribbean islands where her family were slave traders historically, and they made a donation to they created an NGO, they created an institute, and they made this public statement. And it was really incredible, actually. It was really incredible. And so this is how we heal our ancestors. This is how we heal them. We can't change what's happened. We can't change historical events that have happened. But what we can change is our own perception. And we are responsible for also healing our ancestors. So this is part of the work. This is part of ancestral healing. And it's very important that people do it, because if they don't look at their story and the story that they've inherited, it's easy for someone who's been a victim to become an oppressor. Right. And then that energy of war and hatred can continue, so we are responsible for stopping that and looking into that very carefully.
That's an amazing story. Thank you for sharing that. And what I got from that was, we're not responsible for what our ancestors have done. So that woman and her family, they're not responsible for the fact that their ancestors, their prior lineage had anything to do with slavery. However, they took responsibility for the healing of it. And that is the piece of responsibility that we do need to take on for ourselves, right? So we're not responsible for what happened, but we're responsible for what's going to happen from that point forward once we become aware. And then we have to acknowledge what's happened. And that is part of that healing process. And I think that is so important for people to hear. And again, a lot of ancestral lineage is somewhat hidden from us because it's something in the ancestral line and it's something we're carrying through our DNA. So we do need to take a deeper look at that. And I think working with you on some of your programs, it sounds like somebody can walk through that process and really uncover what those belief systems are to help overcome those. So I appreciate you sharing that. And I did want to switch gears just slightly here. And I would love to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, which is animals. And you talk a lot about a power animal. And I just love that idea. So I would love if you could share a little bit more with us about what is a power animal, and do we all have one? Do we pick the power animal that we like, or that represents our personality? How does the power animal symbolism work for us?
So firstly, a power animal, yes, I'm sure you can pick one if that's the way you're feeling it. But often what happens is that those animals come to us, and they come to us in dreams, or they come to us in the waking state, and creates this pattern where you're just aware of maybe dogs come into you, or you're aware of having certain dreams where maybe you're always seeing the elephant. And as you become aware of that, then you could say, I have this power animal and it's an elephant, because I've noticed that in my life, I often dream about elephants, especially when I'm struggling. So that's an example of a power animal. Often the animals choose us.
Speaking of animals, I know that you have a slideshow that we are going to take a quick peek at, and I'm going to go ahead and bring that on screen so that we can take a look, and I'm going to let you narrate this for us.
So every year I run dreams and tracking in the Kalahari retreats, and I'm going to be running my next retreats in the Kalahari in Botswana, next year in February and March. And Dreams and Tracking in the Kalahari is about teaching people indigenous African skills so they can connect with the inner tracking and also outer tracking. The focus of it is it's a African shamanic masterclass in teaching people indigenous skills involving spirit tracking. So spirit tracking means connecting to the face inside of you that has no name, connecting to your immortality, and connecting to Mother Nature. And so with inner tracking, I teach people how to connect with their ancestors and their dreams. And then my colleague, Owen Meyerberg, teaches outer tracking, which is animal communication, interspecies communication, and tracking animals, tracking the sand, following animals through the bushveld. And we go to the Kalahari, and we go to the Okavango Delta because these are two of the oldest and wildest and most unspoiled places left on planet Earth today. And the Kalahari and Okavango Delta are seen as one of the 7 wonders of Africa. So it's very beautiful. So this is me here in this image here. I'm running the retreat, and I've got my full ceremonial gear on, and I've created this shrine tent in the wilderness in the Kalahari Desert, and this is the altar in front of me. So these are tracks in the sand. So our job as we wake up in the morning is to learn how to follow the tracks in the sand, because the tracks in the sand is like the newspaper. This is the African newspaper, and then you get to see the movement of animals and the story which is laid out in the sand. So beautiful. This is the Kalahari lion. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, lovely, beautiful. And this is the gemsbok. Often see them in the Kalahari. And then you got the springbuck.
Incredible. Are these pictures that you've taken?
This is taken. Some of these pictures are pictures I've taken, and others are from my colleague Alwyn Meyerberg. And this is the leopard. So he calls his safari company Matsebe Safaris, and Matsebe is the name of this wild leopard that he befriended years ago, and had developed this incredible telepathy with this leopard. And this is how I was invited to Botswana to work with him, because he had this telepathic communication with the leopard, and he said, "What do you think of John Lockley?" And then the leopard said, "Bring him to Botswana as soon as possible, because I want to download some sacred information to him." And then Alwyn contacted me on WhatsApp and said, "John, how quickly can you get here?" And I said, "Well, I'm on this book tour at the moment in Montreal, but I'll be there in a few months." And he said, "Great." And that's how the story began.
Wow. So have you been to visit and seen this leopard since that information came through?
Yes. So
did you get the download?
Yes. So unfortunately, she died just before I got there. She died, but I was able to meet her daughter. Yeah, I met her daughter.
Oh, she's beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow.
So this is the retreat, and these are the people, and this is us walking through the bush in the Kalahari Desert at the safari lodge we're staying at. These are our morning walks, like a morning yoga walk. So we walk through the bush for about 2 hours, observing the sounds and the smells and the tracks in the sand. And we work alongside the Kalahari Sand Bushmen, the first people. They're seen as the oldest indigenous tribe in the world, the Bushmen of the Kalahari. And they teach us how to forage and how to find medicinal plants. And then every day we are led by a sand tracker who shows us the tracks in the sand and what to watch out for.
Wow.
So this is Klikau. Klikau is one of the Bushman elders, and there he is, a very dignified and beautiful man, and he teaches us a lot. And he was teaching us and showing us how they hunt, how they hunt with a bow and arrow, and what involved, what does that look like, and how do you do it, So this is me, and this is Klikau, and this is the end of the ceremony. And he asked me when we were foraging for plants in the previous few pictures, he turned and he asked his son, he said, I'd really like to see what John is doing in the shrine tent. And he said all of this in the Bushman language, which is a click language. And then he looked at me and they translated, and I said, you are welcome in my shrine tent anytime. So the next day, he came into the shrine tent with his whole family. It must have been about 10 people. And we prayed together, we laughed together, we sang together. And then at the end, I gave him a gift and we shook hands. And there was this vulture that flew low over the tent. And as it flew over, it was a wonderful sign, because the vulture represents healing and transformation. So it's an incredible sign, because this was the culmination of my vision of ancient and modern man sitting around a fire, revisioning our future as human beings. And this is exactly what we did in that moment. Yes, so this is the ancestor of domestic dogs. So it's incredible to actually sit with wild dogs who are related to wolves, and they're actually known as African painted wolf or the wild dog. And their eyes are very primal and very wild. And as you sit with them and spend time with them, it really puts you in touch with the wildness of the wilderness. So the termites are seen as one of the keystone species of the Okavango Delta, because they help to create the delta. So the delta has been held together by a lot of termite mounds. So they're very magical creatures. Termites are very magical creatures, and they've been held together, and their whole life has been orchestrated by the queen. The queen is this long termite that lives about 4 meters under the ground next to the water table. And she is like the brain of the whole mound, this queen. And she lives to about 60 to 80 years, so it's incredible.
Wow.
The termite mound, the queen of the mound,
That's so interesting. I didn't realize they could live that long.
I didn't either. It was incredible when I learned that.
That's a dung beetle, right?
Yes, so the dung beetle is also a very sacred animal, and you often see elements of the dung beetle with Egyptian spirituality. And
you see it in jewelry a lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the dung beetle is very sacred and it helps to keep the bush clean from dung. And the dung beetle navigates with with the stars, like a GPS. They find, so it navigates itself based on the stars. So it's quite incredible.
Interesting. Wow.
So there we are, moving through the bushveld, learning this ancient art of indigenous medicine, of tracking and listening. And there's the elephant. There's lots of elephants in Okavango Delta, and because Botswana is a very safe zone for elephants, and elephants know that. So there's a lot of orphaned elephants that come over the border from Zambia and from Zimbabwe. They come over, and so they're inundated with elephants in Botswana. It's incredible. There's a baboon. So the baboon are known as the old men of the bush. That's the way they're referred to by the Khoi, the Khoi Bushmen. They're seen as the old men of the bush. They're very wise. So here's the giraffe, and there's the buffalo. Beautiful buffalo. Sunset. Sunset in Africa or in South Africa Botswana is really beautiful. It's something else,
Absolutely. Wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing those with us. I really appreciate that. And those pictures are from the retreat that you offer in Botswana, which I know you have a retreat coming up in the next few months. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So Dreams and Tracking the Kalahari is an incredible retreat, because it's very unique, and it's the only retreat of its kind in Africa today. The only retreat where people are learning African indigenous tracking skills and spiritual skills to engage with the wilderness. So at the moment, there's many retreats which are safaris and photographic safaris, but this is the only one to date that is being led by an indigenously trained African shaman, which is myself, and also being led by a safari guide, Alwyn Myberg, who was also brought up with the Bushman people from an early age. So it's focusing on Africa. It's being taught by African people, and it's being held by people who are living in the Kalahari, and it's a family home. So it's an incredible retreat from that point of view. So if people are looking for an authentic African shamanic experience, a masterclass, then you can look no further. This retreat will cover all of those bases for you. And it's also going to cover the wilderness base in terms of connecting with animals, learning animal communication, and also working alongside and learning alongside one of the oldest indigenous group of people in the world, which are the Bushmen people, because the San people will be helping us every day with tracking the animals, and then we'll be spending a day where they will be teaching us how to forage for medicinal plants. So it's an incredible retreat, an incredible opportunity, and my feeling behind the retreat was to help bring people from overseas, from the modern world, and teach them African indigenous healing techniques so that they can fall in love with Africa, but also so that they can learn sacred ways of connecting to their spirit, to their ancestors, and also to earth, to Mother Nature. So we are going to a pristine wilderness setting, and I call it the Garden of Eden, a place of extreme beauty, a place of innocence, and a place where people can reclaim and reconnect to their humanity and take that message of humanity and of beauty with them home from wherever they come from. So that's Dreams and Tracking in the Kalahari. Everyone's welcome to join me. Just go onto my website, seanlockley.com, and you'll see Dreams and Tracking in the Kalahari. And the bookings are open for another few more weeks until the end of December and early January. And then we start our retreats kind of mid-February, and then the second one will be at the beginning of March. And we have a few places left, a few places available.
Well, that sounds like an amazing experience. And if anyone is interested, I would encourage you to go as soon as possible to John's website. We'll include that link in the description of the video because I know there's only a few spots left. And you would be a very lucky person to join on this retreat. It sounds like it's going to be full of adventure. So thank you again so much for sharing about that. And I know that you also have a YouTube channel and you have a book titled Leopard Warrior. And so we'll include the links in the description of the video as well. And you also offer courses as well on your website. And just as we mentioned earlier, you were very generous to offer to do some drumming with us. And we would absolutely appreciate that. I would love to hear some beautiful drumming. Thank you for offering that to us.
And maybe I could also mention that if people wanted a traditional divination, I also offer that, where I throw the bones in the traditional Swazi and Xhosa way. And it's a way for people to connect to their soul. So to be a diviner like myself, our job is to connect to the soul of someone and then to give them teachings and ways to grow their spirit, grow their soul. So it's a traditional practice that we are taught through our apprenticeship, and we are also given the calling of being a diviner through our dreams. So that's something I like to share with people. If they're interested in that, then they can click on my website to find out more.
Great. That sounds wonderful. Thank you.
So here is my drum. It's called an isigubor. And I'll just play the drums. So feeling your heartbeat, just taking a moment, just closing your eyes, putting your hand on your heart, taking a few breaths in and out. Closing your eyes and welcoming nature, welcoming life into your inner world. Feeling your pulse, feeling that space inside of you. Abazali bamu bamu, abazali bamu bamu, hey abazali bam, hey abazali bam bam, abazali bam, hey abazali bam. Myange, 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 hey, myange, hey, myange, hey, hey, abazali bambo, bambo, abazali bambo, bambo, hey, hey, abazali bam, hey, hey, abazali bambo, abazali bam, abazali bambo, hey, abazali bam, hey, hey, abazali bambo, abazali bam, abazali bambo, abazali bam. Volenle la manyange, volenle la manyange, hey hey amanyange, hey hey amanyange. Volenle la bazali bamo, volenle la bazali bamo, hey hey abazali bam, hey hey abazali bamo, abazali bam. Amakosi wamo, 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 amakosi wamo, 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 hey 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 amanyange, hey 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 amanyange. Tamagwini amanyange, hey tamagwini amanyange, hey 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 amanyange, hey hey amanyange. Siyabulela bana badala ecamago, vunelela amakosi makhulu ecamago, siyanqula siyathandaza ecamago. Amandla amanyange ecamago, amandla amaxhosa amandla, amandla amagqirha ecamago. Vunelela abantu abadala ecamago, vunelela uThixo ecamago, vunelela izinyanya ecamago. Anceda abantu ukuyiva umoya ecamago. So feeling your heartbeats, feeling the pulse inside of you, breathing in the drum, allowing the medicine of the drum to ground your spirit into the earth, into Mother Nature. Amaku. Blessings. Blessings on everyone. Blessings.